Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw. And it's titled Annapurna, which is in Nepal. And the photograph is the super high impact images where it's like blue sky, incredible mountain with snow on the peaks. There's almost no vegetation, or there is no vegetation. So it's all gray, black, brown. And there's a trail, and on that trail there's somebody who's hiking, full-on hiking gear. Because the snow isn't abundant, I would say this isn't winter, although it's very high, so there is snow. And is that you in the photo? Off in the distance?
No, alas, this is not me. It's not my photograph. I was never there.
Oh,
But
okay.
but my son was there, and he took that photo, and I have used it for teaching purposes and other things. I wish I had been there.
Okay, teach me. What am I looking at? Why is this important?
Okay, so it's important. This is the Himalayas. It's the Annapurna region of the Himalayas. There's something over 100 peaks in the world that are higher than 7,000 meters, and all of them, every single one of them, is in the Himalayas. So it's just a most spectacular mountain range, but much more important than that, the Himalayas formed when India, we'll call it a subcontinent, a continent of India, converged with Asia, got pushed into Asia, and because they were two continents, neither one could go down underneath the other, so they kind of just pushed up this massive wall of rock that extends over thousands of kilometers. And as you can see from the picture, they're very rugged, beautiful. But from my perspective, and really from the climate change perspective, what's happening here is that these rocks are eroding. The rate of erosion, and you can see that in the picture, where you can see where there's what we call talus slopes coming down the sides of the mountain, because pieces of rock are falling off of those steep slopes and falling and rolling down the mountain. So the rock of those mountains is being eroded into small pieces, and those small pieces are then being weathered, chemically weathered. And the really critical thing that's happening here is that as they're weathered, carbon dioxide is part of the process. It dissolves, becomes carbonic acid. It participates in the weathering process, and the carbon that was in the atmosphere gets taken out and goes into solution and is washed out to the sea. So when the Himalayas formed, and that started around 50 million years ago, it started an accelerated process of erosion and weathering here on the Earth. I mean, there were lots of mountains anyway, but as I said a little while ago, these mountains are head and shoulders.
Yeah.
Bigger, higher, more extensive than any other mountain range. And so the rate of erosion on Earth, as a result of that collision between India and Asia, it became higher. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere started to decrease as a result of that, and the Earth's climate cooled. So over the past 50 million years or so, there's been this progressive, not continuously progressive, but general decrease in the Earth's temperature.
Right.
That's why this image is important to me. It's just an example of that process, and it's important because that's given us the climate we have today. In the Eocene, the temperature here on Earth was 16-15 degrees warmer than it is now.
Okay.
And we know what 1 degree of warming is like. What it's done, it's scary. But to have something 16 degrees warmer, so a completely different world 50 million years ago in terms of climate. And not that it was a crisis, because it had happened slowly, had got warm slowly, and everything was used to that.
Right.
The crisis that we're facing right now is that it's happening quickly. And
Right.
we're not used to it, and ecosystems are not used to it. So
Right.
there you have it.
Just so that you can also have some background and context, you understand where this episode, where our conversation fits within the greater podcast library, I guess, is that I have personally 4 main interests. One of the interests is conservation and conservation science. I'm drawn to science. And so one of the, and right now the cluster of guests that I'm having is around climate science and climate change and just conservation more generally. And
Cool.
one of the previous guests also, he lives south of you. He lives in Oregon or Washington State. And his look was at, how's fauna adapting to climate change? And, as you say, it's happening very quickly. And so some animals adapt, he gave some examples of Darwinian evolution, visible adaptation just because of hurricanes on this small kind of lizard.
Right.
So in your sense, in terms of your training, in terms of your exposure and worldview, you're looking at timescales that are extremely large, right? So when you look, like being in Canada also has, first of all, massive territory. So being on the West Coast, you're seeing much younger mountain ranges than, say, the Canadian Shield, which is much older. So in terms of this image here of the Annapurna, why does this kick off the conversation?
Well, generally I want to talk about climate change, but the work I've been doing is in understanding past climate change, and as you said a minute ago, understanding processes that happen very, very slowly and how they've impacted the Earth. So that's why this is important to me, because the processes that are exemplified by that photograph took tens of millions of years to actually make a big change on Earth. And obviously this kind of thing has happened in the distant past as well, but this is just kind of the most graphic, fairly recent example of it. I mean, we're going to look at a picture of the Rocky Mountains in Canada, and those mountains are like 150 million years old. They've been pushed up more recently than that. So they're younger, in fact, than these Himalayas. Or older, I mean. And so.
So do you want to, so you want to move on to the next image, or do you want to say...
Whatever you want to do, sure.
Okay, great.
You're the boss.
Okay, from my Muay Thai training in Thailand and stuff, the general attitude is if we're not laughing, we're not doing it as well as we can be. So laughter is obviously very welcome. So let's move on to the next photo. So is life really a gift? Really? Can you make every second count? That's the whole point of the podcast. So if you like what you've seen and you're inspired, because that really is my mission, then please give it a like, subscribe, and share.
Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.